so, okay, I've told you about the design. What does that mean in terms of features? So it's a monolithic 1K by 1K sensor. And that monolithic means that there's no gaps. So some other sensors are stitched together. You get basically gaps in between where they're stitched together from multiple sensors to try and make them bigger. But we have a single piece of silicon that we've made this out of with 15 micron pixels. We run very fast, so for your 1024 by 1024 pixels, you can run at almost 2000 frames per second for full frame. And then if you window down and go to even smaller, you can get to 87,000 frames per second. And then the other thing we've done is mechanically, I showed you that photo at the start of what it looks like. And I guess a lot of people wouldn't really care what their camera looks like, but the implication of how we've designed it to be very compact is that you can mount it now on any microscope. So if it's Joel, if it's Thermo Fisher, if you have a CETA already installed, you can go opposite it in the same box so that we try to make sure that you always have space on your microscope that you can add Celeritas XS onto it, and there's no issues there in terms of collisions. So we have very robust anti-collision electronics, and we can go onto any microscope. And so what can you use it for? So if you use this large area readout, like I showed you, the 1K by 1K pixels, 2000 frames per second, we can do in situ TEM. And all of those DQE plots that I showed you, the effect of having a very good DQE is that you get atomic resolution TEM images and you record them really, really nicely. So Celeritas XS works very well as an in situ TEM camera, and the speed is really where we think it can be leveraged. So I'll show you an example in a second of that. And then at the higher speed is when you read out only 64 by 64 pixels in the middle. You can go like really extremely fast. And that's really useful for if you're just measuring the bright field disk. You're doing things like bright field disk ptychography. If you're measuring center of mass of the disk, so that will be for electric field, magnetic field studies. This is all really useful, and you can do it at the maximum frame rate of the camera. And then in between that, you have the option to choose intermediate readout areas, and you get intermediate speeds. So 256 by 256 is, I think, like 10,000 frames per second or 15,000 frames per second. And that's quite useful for crystal grain orientation mapping. And then potentially if you have large shifts in your beam when you're doing like large area mapping, and if there's a lot of wobble, then you can use larger areas and you can measure it really well, also at relatively fast speeds.